Hello, Shoyan here. Today, I'm installing the flooring on the first floor. I start by installing a small entrance sill called a kamachi and then lay knotty floorboards. Floor installation is a pretty common part of my work, whether it's for a new build or a renovation. I think flooring videos might be the ones we upload most often. As always, the first step is installing the entrance kamachi. The entrance for this house is smaller than those on the other houses I've worked on. The height difference between the entrance tiles and the main floor is 7 centimeters. Among all the kamachi I've installed so far, this one is the smallest and the most stylish. The client initially requested to install the kamachi at the right angle, but there's a wall on the right side. To make it work, I removed the sill plate so the end of the kamachi aligns with the barge board and matches the width of the tiles. No matter its size, the kamachi is always installed over the sill. This ensures stability, it won't shift when stepped on, and it makes height adjustments easier. Since this flooring setup doesn't use joists, it has a 24mm subfloor and 15mm floorboards on top. Because of this, the overlap between the kamachi and the sill is smaller than usual. Even so, the amount of overlap is enough for stability. I notch the kamachi using a circular saw and secure it in place. Next, I attach the kamachi with glue and screws. The subfloor is made of structural plywood and the sill is kiln-dried timber. Since both materials are fully dried, the glue creates a strong bond. After applying the glue, I add screws to make it even more secure. Normally, a tension rod is used to press the kamachi down on a leveled area like this. But because there's a subfloor next to it, I use a piece of scrap wood and screw it down instead. This method pulls the kamachi tightly downward into place. Once it's screwed into the sill, it won't move. Now that the kamachi is installed, I can move on to the flooring. Before laying the floorboards, I measure and decide their placement. The floorboards I'm using today are knotty hinoki cypress, which I'm working with for the first time. Since I'm not used to measuring these floorboards, their positions may shift during installation. This is because the floorboards may have slight variations in size. To avoid this, I temporarily join 4 to 5 boards together and measure the actual width and spacing.
ちょうどこれで55。これで1000。60やね。ほら、1ミリ悪いやん。
For the first floorboard, I choose the straightest and easiest wood to work with, regardless of the knot. It's hard to cut the board straight with a circular saw when the grain is irregular or the wood tends to warp. Since the first 2 boards affect the alignment of the entire floor, I select and install them carefully. The floorboards are 15 millimeters thick hinoki cypress with live knots. As I mentioned, it's my first time using them. They feature live knots as a part of the original wood, unlike dead knots that are often replaced with round wood pieces with live knots. Even though some knots have minor cracks, these floorboards are completely dry. This is rare even after being processed into floorboards. It would only become apparent a few months into construction if the floorboards weren't properly dried, which is something I want to avoid. I believe these boards are less likely to develop gaps after installation. I install the first floorboard. For the floorboard near the door, I staple 2 boards together. The angle brackets will be installed afterward, which is characteristic of vinyl door frames. I use silicone glue and 38mm staples to secure the floorboards. Screwing into 15mm thick hinoki planks can damage the edges even with thin screws, so staples are a better option. The structural plywood underneath is hard enough to hold the staples securely, making it less likely for them to come loose, and the subfloor reduces creaking and distortion compared to laying directly on joists. One of the biggest challenges for this project is the floor vents. This is my first time installing flooring with vents. The crawl space is ventilated for air circulation with natural airflow between rooms and mechanical ventilation in the kitchen and bathroom. Because of this air ventilation system, floor vents are necessary.
こういうこっちゃな。ええ。
There are various types of floor vents, but these vents are assembled on site. They're made from high-quality Hinoki cypress. I install support pieces first, then fit the vent unit into place. Unfortunately, my finished nailer finally gave out. It had been leaking air for a while and has been repaired 5 or 6 times already. I've never had to send any other tool in for repairs as often as this finished nailer. At this point, the valve is broken and it's just an air duster.
Eh. こうかな。
As I managed to install 2 vents along the edge of the room, I can now lay the floorboards. There are 6 vents in total, so I'll likely face this challenge again. I cut all the boards for each section at once. Whether I need to decide the order or not, cutting and laying them out beforehand makes the process smoother compared to selecting and cutting them one by one, which is a hassle. Next, I temporarily protect the installed flooring and move to a new spot to cut the floorboards. I need to move the workbench as I continue installing the floor, but I can't fully protect the completed area. This is one of the challenges of filming my work. I've never mentioned this before, but when filming, I have to remove protective coverings to show the completed floor. For example, I can't just say it's done and show the floor with the coverings still in place. To work around this, I temporarily protect the finished area before moving my workbench to a new location. Even temporary coverings need to be applied carefully to avoid scratches. I've now moved the cutting area and I'm starting again. For the next floor vents, I had to decide whether to align the vent with the center of a floorboard joint or the center of the window frame. In the end, I chose the window frame for better alignment. Working on the edges demands extra precision, especially with the combination of long and short boards. I hope it won't lead to gaps or warping in the future.
5ミリ伸びたよな。
Now, it's time to work on the technique called Kubikiri. There's an exposed pillar, so I notch the bottom to fit the floorboards, which is simple work. Although I bought a multi-tool, I prefer using a fine handsaw for delicate cuts to avoid damaging the exposed pillar. I thin a piece of floorboard to match the saw blade's thickness, place it on the subfloor, then lay the saw on it to cut at the exact height of the floorboard. Next, I measure the notched area where two floorboards join. The first board has a tongue on its edge, so I notch the edge of the second board to match the depth of the tongue. Once notched, I insert the second board and position it. The notch allows it to fit deeper into place. I then join the first board and secure it to the subfloor with staples. Finally, I adjust the second board back slightly by the depth of the tongue. This process might sound complicated when explained, but it's much easier to understand when you see it in action. It's better to keep the pillar's notch as small as possible. For a 7mm tongue, the pillar should be cut 15mm deep on one side. The other side can be 7 or 8mm deep. This method, where the second floorboard is inserted deeper first, the first board joined, and then the second board pulled back into place, is called the Yario Kururi technique in Japanese. Although most of the floorboards have knots, I'm using ones with fewer knots near the entrance. They're not completely knot-free, but since there are only a few, I install them specifically at the entrance. I finished installing the flooring on the first floor. Hinoki flooring with prominent knots gives it a vibrant look. It looks nice. That's all for today. Thanks for watching.